Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you for joining us for one of our talks today. I'm so excited today to be joined by the fantastic Sydney Sweeney to talk about everybody's latest new obsession, HBO's The White Lotus. And I wanted to start by talking about your audition process a little bit because it sounds like part of your process is to actually also really look at some of the work of and research the people that you might end up working with on a project, which is so fantastic. And for a project like this, in looking at the cast that you were working with, particularly because there's so many great comedic voices and you have Mike White's comedic sensibilities. How did that help you in starting to formulate Olivia, even at those early stages, and really starting to figure out, what are the beats and the rhythms of her as a character and where the humor was going to lie, even when you were auditioning at the beginning?
Yeah, so in the beginning, I was only given, I believe, two scenes of Olivia's. It was the scene in the first episode when Olivia and Paul are on the boat and they're assuming different things about everyone's lives. And then I think the other scene was a dinner scene with the family. And to be honest, when I first read it, I was like, oh my God, what are the beats? Like, how am I gonna play her? Because there were so many different avenues that I could take Olivia down. And the only note that I remember being given by my agents was it was like they're looking for someone who has like fast timing. I'm like, oh my God, I've never done comedy or timing or anything like that before. So I was really nervous. And I think I took like 80 takes for my auditions tape. I also do that quite often. I am a perfectionist, so I will do it and watch it and then do it and watch it to make sure that I am sending the best I could. But Olivia was like this character that just toyed with me quite a bit. And I think that once I finally got Olivia and got more of the scenes and was able to live in it, I kind of enjoyed what she was doing and leaned more into that. And I think that's how I found a lot of the timing with Olivia was me hating her so much and just allowing that to come out. And then, I mean, I've been a huge fan of Connie's since I was little. My mom and I would watch Nashville all the time together. And Molly Shannon and Jennifer Coolidge. I think I went on like a Jennifer Coolidge binge and watched everything possible. So it was like one of those experiences where you kind of have to sit there and take in every second because everything that comes out of their mouths and Mike's mouth as well is just pure comedy gold. And I sit there going, how can I attain something like this?
And you've mentioned that Mike gave you and Brittany a podcast to listen to, which is kind of like two girls going back and forth, and that was where a lot of the monotone delivery came from. But then taking it that step further from the monotone, and the fact that the two of you, both in your performances, really play with like the rhythm and the beats of the dialogue as well, and your character never is afraid to let the silence just sit there and make a moment really uncomfortable from not saying anything, as much as she'll also acerbically really fast deliver some
Right.
sort of
I,
comeback.
I
And
think
so
the silence was definitely the funniest parts for us because we'd sit there and we knew that we were just cutting them and it was amazing.
but I wanted to ask you about those aspects and really how you kind of landed on that final intonation of taking that idea of the really monotone delivery, the mix of acerbicness and then the silence, and playing around between all the different beats and dynamics, because the same delivery isn't the right thing for every single moment, even within a scene.
Mhm. Yeah, so when I believe the podcast was Red Scare, and I would listen to it and just repeat everything the girls were saying to try and find that level. And there was like this weird draw that they had to them as well, where it felt like they were half there and half not there. And I wanted Olivia to feel like she didn't care, but you knew she cared so much that she was putting on this show that she didn't. And so every scene, whether it was with Connie or Alex, like she had a different persona that she would put on, which with each person, even if it's not like a drastic change, but she had to be like these different people to feel confident in herself.
Yeah. And I love how meticulously detailed you get when you craft characters. And even with this one, down to thinking about, okay, when she was 4 years old, she probably had a nanny who came and took care of her. And the character books where you'll journal every detail from when they were born up until we meet them on screen. And so, what were some of the other details beyond thinking about a situation like a nanny when they were younger and how that influenced her relationship with her parents? And what were some of the key milestones that you really wanted to map out for Olivia?
A lot of it definitely was what happened in middle school and high school for her, because I think that totally shapes who a person is. And when you're still at this adolescent age where when you're 25 will be completely different from when you're 20, but the 16-year-old self definitely has shaped the 19-year-old self. So I had a lot of high school instances that have happened in the college process, and how she and Brittany became friends, and the different turmoils that happened between that friendship and boys and drugs and everything that created who she was in that moment.
Yeah. And the friendship between Olivia and Paula is so fascinating because they're both friends and close and yet also not, and withholding so much information from each other, and clearly they also don't trust each other at all in so many ways. So it's that kind of like
That's definitely all of Olivia's fault.
that was the impression I got from the show. But I wanted to ask about how the two of you wanted to shape that very specific dynamic between them, where it is closeness, but at the same time there's a huge void between them, even though they're literally sleeping next to each other in a sofa bed in a hotel room.
Yeah, I think Brittany and I definitely were able to just fall into sync with it. I'm more of the kind of person where I like to approach and not have to plan or talk much about it, because like right now I didn't plan or talk what this interview is going to be right now. And so she and I definitely, like, we listened to the podcast together, and we would sit down with Mike and talk about different scenarios with our characters, and like where they came from and how they process different things. But like actually sitting down and running through the timing of scenes wasn't something that we did, because we wanted it to feel organic and not so like, oh, this is the timing that we planned out. Which I love, because even though yes, there are pure identified beats within these scenes, it all looked very organic and felt organic at the same time.
And is a lot of that character development and backstory history that you do, does having that level of intrinsic foundation also really help in terms of
Oh,
you can then
100%.
show up and just throw it away and just focus on the moment?
Yeah, completely. Because I'm not having to actually think about, oh, this is what my character, this is what Olivia would be acting or saying or feeling or thinking, because I I know Olivia so well that I don't even have to really think about it. I'm already in her mindset. And so whatever is said or done kind of just affects me the way that it would affect Olivia. And I'm not having to plan it, or I'm not having to like, in the scene where Olivia is upset with Paula, I'm not having to think about, oh, my brother broke, like, hurt my feelings when I was 10 and stole my car, and like having to think of something outside of the scene. I'm able to just think about what's happening in the moment as Olivia, because I have built her so precisely and into such a living being.
Yeah. I also wanted to talk about the multiple scenes throughout the show where it's Olivia and Paula looking for the backpack, because that just keeps on building in terms of tension and the comedic beats of how that lands. And it kind of, it was like almost like Meerkat-esque, the way that they would just like be darting, looking around every room and every situation and every person as a possible suspect for where that bag could be. And was it quite natural and intrinsic to the two of you in how you found the rhythm of those scenes? Because you're taking, in essence, you're taking the same idea of a scene and finding different ways to play it each time with each other as well.
Yeah, we definitely had to remember where we're coming from, where we're going, what stage and process and how far along into this trip have we been missing this bag, how urgent is it. Basically our entire livelihood and is in this backpack. So as time went on into the trip, the more dire it became.
Yeah. And then there's so many great scenes where Olivia's talking to people that are in essence complete strangers, when you're with Alexandra Daddario and she, it's almost like there's this complete playfulness like a cat with a mouse where it's like, okay, I'm interested enough to ask you a few questions. Now I'm going to break you down and now we're just ending the conversation and I'm completely walking away. So how are you navigating and figuring out that almost like puppetry that she's playing where she really likes to play with people and then just lets them go when she's done with them?
What's really interesting is that scene is actually the first scene we ever filmed. And I was really nervous about that scene because there was so much toying and just manipulation that Olivia played with within it. And I still was the entire time I was like, oh my God, am I funny? I was so nervous that I wasn't pulling Olivia off because I was surrounded by Molly Shannon, Jennifer Coolidge, Steve Zahn, all these people. I'm like, who am I? Why am I here? And so doing that as the first scene, I was really intimidated and really nervous and second guessing actually quite a bit. And I was worried that I was going to get sent home. But I think that I think that it played well, and it was funny being able to play with Alex because she's such an amazing actress, and uh, being able to kind of give her like medicine or something like that, and make her nervous was definitely something I never thought I'd be able to do.
And I feel like I heard you mention as well that when Olivia's reading books, that you felt like it was actually all just about the projection rather than actually reading the books. And were there other details as well throughout the show where it was very much for Olivia just about the image that she's projecting, even though she's in a hotel full of strangers that don't even know her?
I think it's also like through her wardrobe. She wasn't dressed up like her mother, and she tried so hard to not be. She wanted to be that rebellious teen in some sort of way that she possibly could. And then if you notice at dinner, she would get a little more dressed up than she would during the day, because I always felt like her mom would get mad at her and she's like, you got to put on a good show for the guests. Like, you can't be seen out like that at dinner with us or sitting with me. And so at dinner, she slowly showed a little bit more of the privilege and the wealth and just the mindset that she was born into.
Yeah. And there's so many great costume moments, like the shirt that she's wearing that says like jam out with your clam out.
That was my favorite shirt. I fought so hard for that to be on the show. I loved it. I thought it was so funny. And I felt like Olivia would just see it in a store. Yeah. Like, I am going to wear this around my mom 24/7. And she would. And I made it so she did.
Was there always a really
little details too of like on the bucket hat there were little mushrooms, or on different socks she would wear they had like little weed symbols. And so I was trying to find different little things here and there that I think that she would try to tick her mom off with, and it was for little acts of rebellion that she thought was rebellion in a way.
Yeah. Were details like that always really clear from the beginning, or was it a little bit of the discovery as you went along and as the costume department went along in figuring out, oh, the more details we can put in that are things where it's really pushing back against her mom because of how much she's trying to not be like her?
I think that I definitely had that idea in the beginning, just because I wanted Olivia to fight so hard to not become her mother, but in the end, she truly is her. And so I was trying to find as many little things in the short amount of time that you get to be with Olivia to show that.
Yeah. And because exactly as you said, she's fighting against becoming her mother, but she is becoming more and more like her. But at the same time, it's not a carbon copy. It's assimilating certain characteristics and traits and beliefs. And so what was your journey of really finding a lot of the details, both in looking at the scripts, but then also really looking at how Connie was encapsulating that character and what you then thought Olivia would actually have absorbed to herself, even though she doesn't want to?
A lot, actually, because in your mind, I create the character and I go, okay, this is how she is. And then being able to, as time goes on, work with someone like Connie, who, her character was amazing. And so sitting there, she'd have these different mannerisms that then I would pick up for Olivia. Like when she sits at the table, she always has her hands in her lap, but just different things that I would notice Connie did that I think that Olivia consciously didn't know that she was doing as well. So as time went on, I would like pick up different things that Connie would do mannerism wise, that I think Olivia would portray as well.
And obviously, because the show was filming, you know, under the cloud of COVID, that influenced a lot of the ways in which things were filmed, but also meant that all of you were on location together. You know, people weren't coming and leaving in between. And it sounds like there were almost these mini bubbles within. So it's like you have the time where you're just around the characters that are playing your family. And how did that shift in the way that everybody was on location together, and also just that kind of forced intimacy, actually a really, really good thing in terms of finding a lot of the dynamics within these character relationships because of the time that you all then got to spend with each other?
I always think it's really important to spend time with the people who you're working with, cast, crew, anyone. I think that you, number one, you build such a more comfortable environment because you get to know someone well. And I think that as an actor, you start to feel safer with exploring different avenues as your art. But being able to kind of be at a very safe camp-esque feeling, I guess, uh, was a lot of fun because I truly felt like I was with my mom and my little brother and my dad, and I missed them all so much at that time. So I had a little surrogate family that I dove into, and it was a lot of fun.
And the relationship that she has with her brother is also so great to watch, in like the way that she's just like, why don't you go sleep on the beach? And he takes her so seriously that he actually literally
He
does.
does, I know, and I actually have a little brother, so it was, I every time I would do a scene with Fred, it's like, oh my God, I hope I never actually was like this with my little brother as a teenager. I felt so bad.
Was that a very kind of like easy and natural dynamic for the two of you to find, or did you do kind of any building out of like their childhood and their sibling dynamic together?
Oh, I definitely like built out everything there was, but just being with Fred, I felt like I was with my little brother, and it kind of just became even more natural than I thought it would be.
Yeah. I also wanted to ask, because going back to Paula, there's so many moments where they're making reference to like, well, you know that Paula has this ailment, or she's got this allergy, or she needs the medication for this thing. And there's constant references to that. And did you and Brittany decide that there was even a slither of truth to that, or was it all fully just about messing with people?
Oh no, we fully believed in all of it.
Yeah.
All of it was 100% real, and don't judge. And we like fully played into every single part.
Yeah. I also love the scene later on when they're on the boat and, you know, Connie's going, why don't you go pull her hair back, when Paula's being
He's
sick off
like,
the edge of the boat. And Olivia has absolutely no idea what she's doing, which in that moment tells you so much about all of her female friendships, that she's never held someone's hair back for them while they were
oh,
being
she's
sick.
always, yeah, everyone else is always holding her hair.
Yeah. And did you find that there were a lot of instances and moments and details like that in the script that really just told you so much, not even just about her relationship and friendship with Paula or her dynamic with her mom, but gave you a lot of those historical elements of this is the type of person that she is around other women and other people?
Everything from how she treats her brother, her mom, Paula, it all kind of ties into the kind of person that she is and what different instances made her who she is. Especially just with Kai and how she kind of slithers into different things because she always wants everything to revolve around her and everything always has to be hers. And for once, Paula had something that she didn't have. And I think that played into a lot of how Olivia probably grew up as well, as everything's always hers. Her friends are hers at her cost, her time, whatever. Whenever she needed someone to come over, they would come over, and it was never on anyone else's time. So I think that I definitely played into that, just taking different facts. I call them like facts or givens from the scene.
Yeah. And when you and Paula were playing that scene where Olivia's calling out the fact that she knows absolutely everything, did you feel like the reason that she immediately is like, I'm not going to rat you out, I'm not going to tell anyone, was out of compassion and friendship, or for her was it all about the power that then gives her to hold that over her and have that piece of information?
I think that I think there's multiple things playing into it. I think that she's heartbroken because even though, yes, she definitely isn't the best of friends to Paula, that is a friendship to her. And Paula crossed her, and no one does that. And Olivia's mind and heart, it broke her heart that she thought that Paula was her number one and wasn't anymore. So I think that it was a lot of just being heartbroken by a friend and not wanting to face the pain of it, to not wanting to lose Paula completely. And three, I think what she will use one day in the future is that against her.
I also found it so impressive how the two of you managed to go for so many minutes within that scene without ever blinking once, and was
Didn't blink?
yeah, like the two of you were just looking at each other, not blinking for the first section of that. Well, I was going to ask if that was an intentional thing or that was editing, but
No, I haven't seen it yet, so
yeah,
I'll have to watch for that. That's so interesting. Am I blinking now? What?
you are blinking now. And then I also kind of like going back to auditioning, I wanted to talk about when you first auditioned for Sharp Objects with David Rubin, because that sounds like it was such a great and really different experience in terms of the environment in the audition room, and the fact that he came in as someone who was ready to play with the scene and workshop the scene with you in that moment. And, you know, up until that point, you've talked about how you hadn't had that type of experience in the audition room. And since that happened, have you had any other environments where that's really happened? And even if not, how has that really changed the way that you think about scenes when you're going into auditions, and the malleability of where you can take something in the room?
Yeah, no, David completely changed my thought process and outlook on auditioning. Actually, before, I had been given my fair share of really shitty auditions where casting directors or assistants are literally eating chips while they're reading with me. They don't know anything that we're doing. It's a horrible read. And as an actor, like, yeah, you can give it your all, but there's still a partner. It's a scene. It takes two people. And so having David, who knew the scene, who like played the scene with you as if he was actually in it, and gave the whole entire environment and the surroundings, was such a cool experience, especially as an actor when sometimes you're having to start screaming and crying for no reason and they're just weirdly standing there, but he like really gives himself to you. And after that, I started going into auditions trying to invoke the other person and want to enjoy the scene with me. So getting to know them, let's be friends, let's hang out, let's do this scene, let's have fun, and getting them more involved in what we're actually doing.
Mm-hmm. And you know, the character work that you do so extensively, I wanted to ask about the journey of going from a point where you were doing really extensive character work and going very in depth and creating a lot of that history and backstory for auditions, and then the journey of kind of pulling back a little bit and finding what it was that you actually needed for that audition, and what that journey was like for you.
You know what's interesting is I don't do all of that process for an audition because I used to, and I would get really close on something and then I wouldn't get it and it would destroy me because I basically felt like I was having this person ripped from my soul in a very deep way. So I had to stop putting so much work into it. And I switched the process where I put all of the building and the work into when I get it. And beforehand, I approach it a different way. I don't do it's just it would be way too much on me.
I also wanted to ask you about your production company, and stepping into the role of a producer, and starting out with optioning a book by Jessica Goodman, and what some of the interesting challenges and learning curves have been in terms of navigating stepping into this world, because I know that you've already started optioning a lot of other projects and working on them in the development stages.
I mean, it's definitely a whole different world that I am thoroughly enjoying. I love the business sides of everything. So being able to build a world more immensely than just a character has just sparked every creative juice inside me, and I'm loving it. So the players table, which is the first one that I'm doing, it's been one of the most like amazing, knowledgeable journeys that I'm going on right now. And then just being able to take different things from that into different processes that I'm going through right now and different books that I have.
Is there any way that that's already started to make you think differently about your work as an actor and the different facets of what go into your performance, just based on being so hands-on and being so involved earlier in the development stages of these projects and the different creatives that you're working with?
Yeah, I don't know if it like affects the creative acting process of it, but it definitely opens my eyes to there's so much that goes on before an actor is even brought to the table, and how much work and devotion that producers or writers or creators have in a project. And I give like immense props to and respect to every single one of them, because it's a process. It's not easy by any means at all. And there's so many revolving parts and people that you have to rely on, and everything has to kind of fall into the correct place. And you can work your ass off on something, but someone else just doesn't like it. And it's not anything you can do or say or anything. They just don't like it, and it's not in your control. So it's definitely a frustrating process, but at the same time, I think it's really rewarding.
Yeah. And in working on Euphoria, because that's the first time that you've taken a character over a multi-season arc, are there any kind of new or different challenges that that's presented, but also at the same time having that obvious level of comfort and familiarity stepping back into a character that you already know, and being able to just carry her further on the journey?
Yeah, I definitely feel like I'm stepping into an alternate home of mine and being able to live out and grow up a little bit. There's I mean, I can't go into detail about some of the challenges that I'm coming across for this season without giving anything away. But it's definitely been a very rewarding season, just being able to push myself in different emotional avenues, and just being able to be with everyone again is amazing.
Yeah. And then finally jumping back to the White Lotus, coming off the back of that project, what did you find were the biggest things that you came away learning from that experience as an actor?
Oh my gosh, I mean, endless amount. Just about one one of the biggest things is because I always, being more on the dramatic side of the industry, when I would look at comedy, I would look at, okay, they're being funny. They're trying to be funny. Like, oh, they're so funny. And so I would go into this going, oh my God, I need to be funny. And then Mike, I wish I could remember the exact words that he said, but it was something along the lines of like, you don't need to try to be funny. Just be natural. Just be you. You just be dramatic. And then that's where I found it. And so now I'm like, okay, I don't need to push or try or do anything. Like I just be. And I think that was one of the biggest advice for the comedy side of the world.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that Mike White saw that comedic ability and the space that you were going to be able
Oh,
to bring this
me too.
character to for the show.
I didn't think anyone would. So,
And you didn't get sent home.
I know we're here. So I think it's all right. We're good.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of this with us, Sydney. It's been such a pleasure to watch your performance on the series, and looking forward to so many more things from you.
Thank you.